Welcome to Season 2, Episode 18 of the podcast, Ghosts, Demons, and Murder, Oh My. My name is Hayden Crook, and I'll be your host for today's episode on Native Americans during the Salem Witch Trials. And the reason I chose this topic for today's episode is November is Native American Heritage Month. Um, my husband is Native American. I wanted to do this episode sooner, but life got in the way and some stuff came up. Um, Yeah, don't want to get like too personal, too deep, or go into details, but life just kind of got in the way and kind of threw me a curveball the last couple weeks with some stuff. So, but there's going to be an episode now, and I'm thinking pretty soon I'll have some more time to record episodes or maybe like pre-record and then uh, schedule them. But yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I know it's been a while. I don't know how long, but yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I enjoy doing this. So enough about me. Let's talk about the Salem Witch Trials and Native Americans. So source one is NewYorkHistory.org. Tatuba was an enslaved Native American woman who lived in Salem Village, Massachusetts in the late 1600s. Historical records do not contain any information about her early life or how she came to be enslaved. In 1692, Tituba lived and worked in the home of Reverend Samuel Parris, the minister of Salem Village. She helped Samuel's wife and daughters do all the work necessary to keep their home running. In January 1692, Samuel's daughter Betty and his niece Abigail Williams became mysteriously ill. A doctor brought in to examine the girls, worried that someone was performing witchcraft to punish the minister and his family. A concerned church member told Tituba to make a witch cake to reveal the identity of the person who was tormenting the girls. Tituba followed the church member's instructions. She mixed the girls' urine with rye meal to make a small cake and then fed it to the family dog. When she was finished, the girls accused Tituba of witchcraft. Tituba was interrogated by Samuel and his most trusted advisors. She denied being a witch and swore that she had done nothing to hurt the girls. Betty and Abigail were too young to be witnesses in a legal case. Samuel may have also suspected that they were lying. Tituba was not arrested, but Samuel punished her anyway. Many years later, Tituba revealed that Samuel beat her for weeks until she confessed to witchcraft. These confessions would have dire consequences for the entire community of Salem. On February 25th, two more young women made witchcraft accusations. Ann Putnam, the daughter of church members, and Betty Hubbard, a 17-year-old indentured servant, said Tituba was using magic to hurt them with the help of two other women, Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. Betty Hubbard was old enough to be a witness in the courts, and her testimony inspired the community to take formal legal action. All three accused women were arrested in February or on February 29th. On March 1st, the three women were questioned by magistrates in the Salem Meeting House. Their fellow community members, including their accusers, watched. As accused witches, they were kept in chains, and the audience was allowed to speak up at any time to share their suspicions about the women. Throughout the questioning, the four accusers screamed accusations. Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne refused to confess to practicing witchcraft, although Sarah Good did say she thought Sarah Osborne might be a witch. But everything changed when the magistrates started questioning Tituba. She told them that the devil had come to her and asked her to join him. Tituba said she had seen Sarah Osborne and Sarah Good use magic to hurt the girls. She revealed that they had been helped by two other women and a man from Boston whom Tituba did not recognize. She told them that Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne had demons in the form of animal companions who helped them commit their crimes. She ended by confessing that they had bullied her into becoming a witch and hurting the girls. When Tituba spoke, her accusers stopped screaming. The magistrates believed this was evidence that Tituba was telling the truth. When she finished, the girls started screaming again. And Tituba told the magistrates that she could see the spirit of Sarah Good hurting them. Then Tituba herself claimed to be struck blind and mute. Tituba's accusers said they could see Sarah Good hurting her for confessing. The interrogation ended in chaos. The next day, the magistrates interviewed Tituba in her jail cell, where she gave them even more details. She told the magistrates that she had signed the devil's book with blood and that the devil had shown her Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne's signatures. She revealed that the book had nine signatures total, implying there were more witches within the community. She explained that she had flown on sticks with her fellow witches. Finally, she confessed that witches had held a powerful meeting in her master's home and used their power to keep him from finding out. Tituba's testimony convinced her community that there was a large conspiracy of witches in Salem, and the magistrates believed her because her story remained consistent no matter how many times they interrogated her. They did not know that Samuel had beaten Tituba until she created the story to save herself. After Tituba's confession, more and more people reported seeing witches and spirits. Their stories lined up perfectly with Tituba's, probably because they had all heard her confession in the meeting house. Instead of wondering whether people were imagining things, the magistrates accepted this as proof that everything Tituba said was true. As a confessed witch, Tituba was no longer considered an immediate threat to the community. In fact, no person who confessed to practicing witchcraft was executed during the Salem witch trials. On May 12th, Tituba was sent to a prison in Boston to make room for all the new suspects who were being arrested in Salem Village. In total, 144 people were accused of practicing witchcraft. 54 confessed, and their testimony was used in the trials of other suspects. Tituba was regularly brought back to Salem to testify at the trials of a number of people who were convicted and executed for witchcraft, but it is difficult to know for sure because the official trial records were lost. 20 people were convicted of witchcraft and executed. 3 more died in prison before they could be tried. Tituba spent an entire year in jail because no one would pay her bail, but her usefulness as a witness allowed her to outlive the hysteria. By the time she was brought to trial on May 9th, 1693, people were questioning whether any of the witchcraft accusations had been real. The word ignoramus was written on the back of her charges, meaning the court found no truth in the charges and recommended the case be dismissed. Tituba was no longer accused of any crime, but Samuel Parris refused to pay the fees necessary to free Tituba from prison. She was sold to another English settler who agreed to cover them. Historians know nothing else about her life. Since 1693, historians, writers, playwrights, and filmmakers have told and retold Tituba's story, embellishing and adjusting it to appeal to their audiences. Today, the myth of Tituba bears little resemblance to the actual woman who told a story to save her life. And see, I didn't know any of that. I was not taught that in school. I had not heard all that. If you're really into this topic and like that time period, like the literature, I'd recommend what's that play? The Crucible. By I think Arthur Miller. Read that. That play will piss you off. All right. Let's see. Source 2 is thewitchhouse.org. Long before Roger Conant and his group arrived in the area that is now Salem, this land was home to an indigenous population known as the Namkeeg Band of the Massachusetts tribe. Partially nomadic, the Namkeeg, Namkeeg, I don't know if I'm saying that right, had seasonal homes throughout the present day North Shore and beyond, which they would travel to and from in order to ensure the most beautiful or beneficial conditions for themselves throughout the year. This would sometimes result in their villages appearing abandoned, with clusters of empty weedis or wigwams dotting the landscape along the coast. This seasonal movement contributed to the confusion and later tension with English settlers who would appropriately empty Namkeeg structures for their own purposes, modifying them as they did to suit their European tastes and styles. Still, the Namkeeg were not an aggressive people. They did not seek war with Conant's crew over the misunderstanding. Tragically, and in retrospect, may have sealed their ultimate fate of being forcibly removed from their ancestral lands by colonists. 20th century historian Sidney Purley describes the tribe as affable and courteous and well disposed, ready to devote the best of what they had to the general good. This temperament was tested but still remained in the face of the loss of their homes and the devastation they faced from European diseases that decimated their numbers in the early 1600s. Despite the deaths of their own people, the Namkeeg treated the English with kindness, sharing with them the secrets of a good harvest in the local climate. Hurley writes that the Namkeeg instructed the English in the planting of corn, teaching them to select the finest seed, to observe the best season, to plant in the hills at a distance from each other and cultivate it through the season. And all of this, again, while dealing with the illness foisted upon them unwittingly by the colonists they reached out to aid. Tragically, disease was not the only destruction that Europeans wreaked upon the indigenous population. Although initial encounters between settlers and natives were courteous, if cautious, the displacement of such peoples as the Namkig led to violence. King Philip's War, 1675 to 1678, was prompted by a breakdown in relations between the Wampanoag tribe and their allies with the settlers of New England. Most, though not all, of the remaining members of the Namkig band were wiped out, with many dying from inhumane conditions as prisoners of war. The survivors have passed down their band name to living descendants who today are represented in and by the Massachusetts tribe. The story of the Namkig, like many told about America's indigenous peoples, is a sad one. Colonialism led to devastation, as European countries sought to extract as much value from indigenous ancestral land as possible. Today we live with the consequences of European mercantile colonialism and its twin descendants, capitalism and imperialism. Unlike the Namkig, who took from the land only what they needed, we carry on the shameful history of value extraction today as we drill for fossil fuels as the planet burns. We must hold on to the memory of the Namkig, therefore, for reasons both moral and selfish. We must never forget what white settlers did to an untimely peaceful people so as to prevent the replication of historical horrors. We must also, however, keep the history of the Namkig alive so we might learn from their practices of responsible cultivation of the earth. Otherwise, we will not only have nearly destroyed the people, but the very land itself that they call home. We have been developing a relationship with the Massachusetts tribe for several years and are grateful they are such a vital part of the future of this place we call home. There's a timeline of the Namkig. Let's see. 1590, Squaw Sachem, leader of the Massachusetts tribe, is born. 1616, Winnepoikin, also known as the Sagamore George, is born, son of Squaw Sachem and Nana Fassermit. His mother will place him as leader of the Namkiag upon his father's death. 1619, Nana Fassermit, leader of the Massachusetts tribe, dies. In his place, his widow, Squaw Sachem, steps into the position of leader. 1625, English colonists led by Roger Conant and the Dorchester colony arrive in present-day Cape and incorporate Gloucester as a fishing village. In hospitable conditions, drive the settlers out after a few years. Fall of 1626, the remnants of the Dorchester colony abandon Gloucester and travel south, settling in an area home to the Namkig. Namkig homes, known as wigwams, were discovered abandoned due to seasonal travel by the indigenous population, and the English took them over for their own dwellings. Conant leads the expedition south, and with the establishment of the settlement, is named governor of the colony. June 24th, 1629, the ancestral Namkog land is officially incorporated by the English and renamed Salem. 1638, Matacom, Sachem of the Wampanoag people, also known as King Philip, is born. 1639, Squaw Sachem deeds what will be known as Cambridge and Watertown to English colonists. April 1st, 1652, Winnepoikin sells the area now known as Nahant to Nicholas Davison of Charlestown. June 20th, 1675, King's Philip War begins. 1675 to 1676, on Deer Island, captured Native Americans are held as prisoners, interred because of their race, which marked them as enemies during the war. Over 1,000 natives are estimated to have died because of malnutrition and other cruel treatment during their internment. August 12th, 1676, Metacom is killed by colonial militia. 1676, when Apoikin is captured while fighting the English in the war, he is enslaved and sent to Barbados. April 12th, 1678, King's Philip War ends. September 1684, when Apoikin dies. Source 3, and let's see, the last source for this episode, or no, sorry, there's one more after. Source 3 is a thesis from Jewel Carey Parker of Appalachian State University. Many magical cures were influenced by Native American healing methods. A cure for a child's hernia required 1.5 inch of the penis of a deer, cold in the old of the moon and boiled in milk. The medicine would be consumed 3 mornings in a row between cockcrow and daylight while abstaining from other foods. Another magical cure for stopping a nosebleed, including letting the blood fall on the knife to cut the bleeding. This could be considered sympathetic magic because the healer allowed the knife to take the pain away from the ailing person. Midwives followed a similar tradition by placing a knife underneath the childbed to cut a woman's labor pains. Cotton Mather's wife asked her doctor if it would be appropriate to cut and apply the warm wool from a living sheep to her breast to decrease chest pain. Her doctor allowed the healing method. Cunning folk were not disrespected by colonists. Colonists often went to them for advice about keeping evil spirits outside their home, telling their futures, as well as revealing the true identity of witches. Cunning folk had the ability to recognize the products of witchcraft because they so closely related to it themselves. In 1693, Increase Mather, a Puritan minister, explained the rules of presenting evidence to the court during witchcraft trials. If at least two credible people could answer a series of questions related to magical practice, and more importantly, the intent of performing such practices, then the one they accused might be considered a witch. He listed how often have they been seen by others using enchantments, conjuring to raise storms, and have been heard calling upon their familiar spirits, and have been known to use spells and charms, and to shew in a glass or in a shoe stone persons absent, and to reveal secrets which could not be discovered but by the devil. And have not men seen such have have not men been seen to do things which are above human strength, that no living man could do without diabolical assistances? Healers who were also cunning folk could recognize these things, as well as the intent of the person who performed such actions. John Damos, historian, historian of American witchcraft, argues that cunning folk also worked in counter magic, such as hanging a horseshoe over the doorway of one's home or laying sweet bays at the threshold to prevent witches from entering. Colonists believed Native Americans could recognize evidence of witchcraft and the work of the devil. This idea stemmed from long before American witch trials began. In 1577, Sir Francis Drake thought South American natives danced around a fire to ask the devil to sink his ship. In a memoir of Sir Walter Raleigh's trip, 1584 to 1487, to Roanoke, he recalled that Native Americans tried to cast spells on the English. As a result, God punished their witches with a plague. 1692, Mary Sibley, the aunt of one of Salem town's afflicted girls, asked John Indian to get his wife Tituba to make a witch cake. Oftentimes, cunning women would make witch cakes of rye meal in the victim's urine. Then, when one fed the cake to a dog, the dog would reveal the witch. Sibley made the decision to feed a witch cake to a dog when a physician determined that the girl's convulsions and odd symptoms were products of something evil and supernatural. Source 4, Penn Today via Christina Garcia. Begins in the house of a minister, says Kathleen M. Brown, the David Boys Professor of History. Samuel Paris' 9-year-old daughter Betty begins to exhibit strange symptoms. The doctor watched her violent fits and suggested supernatural causes. Stranger still, the illness seemed to be contagious. Paris' 11-year-old niece Abigail Williams was beset by fits, followed by two others, 12-year-old Anne Putnam and 17-year-old Elizabeth Hubbard. By March 1st, 1692, three women were accused of witchcraft: Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba, an indigenous woman from Barbados, who was enslaved by Paris. Thus began the Salem witch hunt, one of the stranger episodes in American history. By its close, 10 girls and young women claimed to be afflicted by witchcraft, resulting in the deaths of 20 people, one of whom was accidentally killed during torture. One of the reasons that the Salem witch trials are still very fascinating to people in the present day, says Brown, is that 17th century Puritan New England was a highly codified patriarchal society. This is not a society that ordinarily provides girls and young women with speaking roles. The young women seem to be on the same page for reasons that nobody really understands, even to this day, Brown says. The young women may have dabbled in fortune telling to ease their anxieties about their marriage prospects, which determine their futures along with their financial stability. Several of the women were servants and nieces who may have experienced heightened anxiety about dim marital prospects due to lack of money and family connections. Many of them were orphaned during skirmishes with Native Americans on Massachusetts' northern frontier and were not only displaced but had recently experienced bloodshed, loss, and trauma, Brown says. Violence occurring on the northern border created a sense that the colonists were losing control, Brown says. People were dying. The Puritan leadership was unable to keep residents of the larger settler community safe from Native Americans, who the Puritans often associated with the devil, Brown says. The leader of the colony, all Anglo Saxon men used to being in power, used to protecting their families, and charged with a sense of religious purpose, were feeling that they are impotent in the face of this challenge from Native Americans, who may be working through the power of the devil to afflict the larger colony, Brown says. The year 1692 was one of general unrest. Just to make it even more complicated, part of the political conflict that's occurring on the brink of the Salem outbreak involves a loss of autonomy in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, says Brown. In 1689, the British Crown inserts its own appointee as colonial governor, and the colony ejects the appointee on the grounds that he doesn't represent their Puritan leadership. Meanwhile, traditional Puritan leadership, along with the population of Puritans, has been shrinking, Brown says. By the 1690s, New England is a much less Puritan place than 1630s. While lots of explanations exist as to why something happens in 1692, it seems that no explanation really gets at all the factors, Brown says. Why are young girls and young women feeling that they're possessed by the devil and are cursed and tormented by older women and men in the community? The afflicted girls begin by accusing people with marginal social status, most notably Tituba, who confessed under torture. They strike out at women that represent failure in the eyes of the community, Brown says, including Sarah Good, who was reliant on charity after her father, a prosperous tavern owner, committed suicide, leaving no will. The Puritan leadership supported the afflicted girls in these accusations. This outbreak resulted in the executions of accused witches because local magistrates and clergymen poured gasoline on the fire, Brown says. The elite leadership of very learned clergymen and local magistrates of the courts were definitely on board with this. Otherwise, the accusations would have remained just that, accusations with local people, baking witch cakes and putting little locks of hair inside a frying pan of urine to see if somebody was really a witch or not, Brown says. But you wouldn't have had people tried. You wouldn't have had the gathering of testimony. You wouldn't have all the documentation if any of the legal apparatus and the expertise of clergymen had been brought to bear. As the afflicted girls grew in confidence, their accusations became more ambitious, and they targeted prosperous and established members of the community. The very end of the accusations, when Governor Phipps of Massachusetts calls a halt to the whole thing, it's because they've accused the governor's wife, Brown says. They do overreach themselves. By October of 1692, several authorities also began to question the veracity of spectral evidence, which had been central to witchcraft trials. If somebody says in court, I saw John Proctor and he was flying through the sky and he flew to so and so's window at night, this would be entered in the courtroom as spectral evidence that John Proctor is in league with the devil and is a witch, Brown says. Questions Questioners begin to wonder, if the devil can make somebody fly, could the devil make you think that you saw them flying, she says. The last of the Salem witch trials was held in May of 1693. In total, between 144 and 185 people were accused of witchcraft. 54 confessed. If you were confessed, you could save your life, Brown says. 19 people were executed, 14 women and 5 men. An 81-year-old man was accidentally killed, pressed to death by stones during torture. All the accused were pardoned by the end of 1693. In many ways, the witch hunt fit in with New England. Oh, the witch hunt fit in with New England folk beliefs and theology, says Brown. Puritans, along with many other Protestants, were strong believers in providence, the working out of God's will on earth, she says. Providence was also the purpose behind a test or an ordeal that it suited God to set before an entire population of people to test their spiritual mettle. In the 1690s, there was a general sense within the Puritan community that they were slipping away from their values. Brown says, just a razor's edge from straying, meanwhile the devil lurked. She says that the idea that the devil had a hand in human affairs and could insinuate himself into your heart and your thinking and try to seduce you away from God was a very normative belief. You can never be so certain that you're on the right side of things in Puritan culture, Brown says. There was a sense that it would be very easy to slip into some kind of really harmful, in the sense of your own soul and in the sense of your larger community, relationship with Satan. Idle hands to do the devil's work, as the saying goes. But the Salem witch hunt happened under or while the Salem witch hunt happened under particular conditions at a particular time, there have been other parallels in American history. Famously, Arthur Miller made the analogy to the McCarthy hearings with The Crucible, a play based on the Salem witch trial, says Brown. The one part of the book I think is still very powerful in the present day is the notion of the fear of something that's beyond your knowledge and ability to control, and the sense that the threat or danger is multiplying and there's nothing you can do about it. During the Red Scare, America had the notion that every secret communist was engaged in the robust production and recruitment of new communists, that it was happening everywhere. And that unless there was some kind of really bold intervention, the numbers of communists would grow exponentially and the whole country would come crashing down, Brown says. While communism and witchcraft are not similar, the mechanism whereby the accused are encouraged to accuse others in a court of law without solid evidence fuels a similar snowballing effect, she says. In the end, she says it all comes down to a question of belief. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Ghosts, Demons, and Murder Oh My. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast so you can get all the updates, information, and content that will be uploaded. Thank you for the support and for listening to my podcast. Episode ideas and recommendations are welcome. And as always, I can be reached via email at hiddencrook8@gmail.com.